Hey there, lovely people. Welcome back to another Story Study Saturday. I'm Sammi, and I'm a writer who likes to learn about writing through reading and share what I learn with you. This week, I want to talk to you about Pomegranate by Nicole Sarcano. Pomegranate is a gender-bent, among many other things, retelling of a Hades and Persephone's story. It is set in the Greek mythology world, but Hades is a woman, and a lot of other details about Greek mythology were also changed. I want to start off by saying I am very, very disappointed in this book. This is easily a very low 2 stars, not like a maybe it could have been a 3. This is like, it should have been a 1, but there were some things that I liked. So I will be as honest as I can be and as positive as I can be about this book. But I do think that there is a lot that we can learn from it. I'm just sad because I was hoping to find more self-published authors that have really great stories. Unfortunately, Nicole is not one of them. At least not right now. She may come out with another book that's significantly better. Hopefully not a part of this series, because I believe this is either currently a series or is going to be a series based on how it's listed on Goodreads. So hopefully she will come out with a book that is actually quite good and not a part of this world. So let's get into my thoughts. I try to keep my thoughts as positive as possible and then keep the things that I think could be improved in the improvement section. So it should all just be the good stuff. So we'll start with, I think it's actually a fine story. Like, the story is fine. It's an epic love story. It's got all of these outside factors that are really impacting the characters, and you can see how that's impacting their lives and all of that. It's got sacrifice, jealousy, war, overall general danger. It's not a bad story. It's perfectly fine conceptually of a story. The mortal man that our female Hades falls in love with is actually interesting. Not necessarily in terms of like in any book he would be interesting, but in juxtaposition with all of the other characters. His "I'm just a normal guy, I'm immortal, I'm a humble farmer man" is really refreshing in comparison to all of the other characters, so I did really enjoy him. Now, on to the improvements. I definitely think this story would have been way better if it was written outside of Greek mythology, because it is very, very separate from the actual Greek mythological pantheon. There's a lot of stuff that was changed. Even knowing the little bit that I know from the Percy Jackson series and a Google search here and there, I know that she changed so much. And I discussed some of the things that were going on in the book with my partner, who is a huge Greek mythology nerd, and he was really mad about it. He was really mad about all of the things that have changed. So I think that if she were to just develop a new pantheon of gods and have them mimic Greek mythology but follow this particular story, you can still call it a Hades and Persephone's retelling, technically, but you don't have to completely change a well-known historical pantheon to fit what you want your story to be. You can make one that will fit what your story is going to be, and it won't end up upsetting people who are actually interested in Greek mythology, because this book is definitely not for people who are interested in Greek mythology. It's not for people who know things about how the Greek gods came to be, what historical events happened that led for certain beliefs to be more well-known than others, and any of those kinds of things. This is not for you, but by marketing it as being a Hades and Persephone retelling, it's targeting the same people that, say, Madeline Miller's books would target. And this isn't for them. This is not for Madeline Miller fans. It's not for people who know about Greek mythology. So putting in a new pantheon would solve that entirely. I also felt like the conflict was regularly running in circles. Like, it wasn't actually impacting the characters. It was just, this conflict has started, and now we're gonna try and solve it by starting a new conflict that starts the same kind of cycle, and we get the same response, and we're just going around and around and around, and it's just a back and forth of doing the same thing with different tactics. There's no growth, there's no movement forward. So I definitely think having some sort of retaliation or outcome from any of the attempts towards solving the conflict would have made it significantly better. Without giving too many details, the ending of the story was incredibly confusing. I had to read, I think, probably the last 5 to 10 pages-ish several times just to understand what was happening and how the story was concluding. And the epilogue was not connected at all to the story. It did not make any difference on my understanding of the story. It didn't make any difference on my interest in reading the second book, which it felt like the epilogue was just there to make you want to read the second book. Looking at it objectively, not subjectively, the epilogue was designed like, hey, there's more to this story. But it did it in a way that I did not care. I didn't care because there was nothing to connect the story that I had just read with the epilogue that was directing you to the next book. So I had nothing besides this out of context epilogue that's like, hey, you should read the next book. You'll like it. But it didn't have anything, hey, you liked this book, so read the next book. Because even if it had that, even if it had something that referenced what was going on in the current book, in that epilogue, to make me want to read the next book, then maybe it would have worked on me. But I don't see any reason to want to read the second book, and the epilogue made me want to read the second book even less. So I would say if you're going to have an epilogue that is going to guide into the next story, you should definitely have it connect to your current one, even if the next story doesn't necessarily tie directly in with the current book or the current conflict that has just been resolved or anything that we are currently related to. It has to tie in to make your readers want to continue going. You have to give it something. For this, I think that there is potential to say that the through line between the full book, the epilogue, and the next book would be the universe that it's in. But the universe wasn't engaging enough. Like, there was nothing special about this particular universe besides that everything about Greek mythology was pretty much wrong. Don't trust that your world would be the best thing to keep you going into the next story. There has to be some stronger through line that your readers feel an emotional connection to. The only example I can think of that would have something similar to that would be the end of the Mistborn trilogy, the first Mistborn trilogy, because the end of that has an epilogue that I believe sprinkles some like thought into what the next trilogy would be about. And the through line for that is the magic system. That's what draws you into the next series, because it's not set with the same characters. It's set hundreds of years later, but it has that Mistborn magic energy. And what you know from the end of the story is what world it's in, who is the god of that world, and how that progression may seem once the magic is in several hundred years in the future. And that's the through line that keeps you going. But there's nothing strong enough in Pomegranate to make you want to keep going universally through the next book. There's no powerful magic system that makes you want to keep going. I definitely think that this book could have used an extra editor or proofreader at the minimum. There was a point where I was like, I'm just gonna mark every time that there is a simple typo, because there shouldn't be this many. So I don't know if I have like an old digital copy because I got it through a library, or if that's just how they're all printed. I hope that it's just an old digital copy that's just still being cycled around, because it's not there. It's not ready to be published. It is in draft form, the one that I have a copy of. So I marked several. I don't have the exact number, but it's definitely more than 5, maybe more than 10. It might be around 12 to 15 different points in this novel that are just like, hey, maybe get a proofreader. They're not hard to catch if you're just reading through it. And it is something that would be more difficult to catch in your own writing, which is why I think that they needed another set of eyes on the project. Also, totally irrelevant for the general understanding of writing, but the word pomegranate was used way too many times. It's just too many times. She had pomegranate hair. She had pomegranate blood. She had pomegranate seeds, pomegranate this, pomegranate that, pomegranate this. Stop saying pomegranate. It's the title of the book. We get it. So what can we learn from Pomegranate? Hire an editor. If you're gonna self-publish, hire a professional editor. If you can't afford like a higher end professional editor, hire a lower end editor, and also hire a proofreader to go through after the editor is done looking at it. You don't have to break the bank on this, but I assure you the better quality of your book that's going out into the world, the more money you will make off of it, because there won't be people like me who are just hoping to find good self-published authors to support, to say, hey, I'm gonna buy your book. I read your book, it's really good. I'm gonna buy your book and put it on my shelves and tell people to read your book because it's a good book and you did it yourself. You're not gonna find me saying, two stars. 2 stars, not a good book, needed a proofreader. And that will make a big difference on the overall outcome of a self-published book. So if you're gonna self-publish, try and mimic, at the bare minimum, try and mimic the normal course that a traditional published book would go through. You need to have at least one other set of eyes. Probably safest to do a minimum of 2, but at least another set of professional eyes on your writing before you publish it. This book can also teach us that writing a fan fiction, which is what this book feels like, or a retelling, which is what this book claims to be, doesn't have to be based on what it is directly referencing. You can do more work and alter that fan fiction idea into your own idea. You can alter that retelling. You don't have to keep it within the parameters of where the idea came from. That's not a requirement. If you're like, wow, I think it would be really cool to see the characters from Soul Eater, but in a place where they weren't having to destroy witches and catch their souls and become a death scythe and all of that, but like instead those characters had to navigate marine biology. Wouldn't that be really cool? Build your world, name your characters something different. You've got a story there. There's nothing that is entirely one thing if you're taking characters out of where they belong and putting them somewhere else. This book definitely took their characters and did something else to them. They changed how the Greek mythology system started. They changed how the underworld works. They changed how Hades got her powers. They changed all of this stuff. And it could have just been a new set of gods. And yes, they could have leaned towards the same characteristics. You could have named Zeus Daniel, and Daniel would have acted just like how Zeus would have. People would have been like, this is really similar to the Greek pantheon, but it's not. There's a lot of things that are different. So that's cool. And nobody would be like, wow, she got everything wrong on the Greek mythology. So taking those things, those ideas that you have, and just altering them to what you want to create is not against the rules. In fact, I would encourage it, because that means you are doing a lot more creative work and you are growing as a writer by doing that. And that's something that I would immediately pull from reading this book. Though, I do not think you have to read this book to get that lesson. I think this video is enough for you to get that lesson, that particular lesson. But that is all I have for you today. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave it a like. If you've read Pomegranate, leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought about it, because I have to be a little bit harsher than the average Joe reader, because I am looking at these things for what we can learn from them. So while I have to be a little bit more critical, if you had a good time reading it, let me know in the comments. And if you don't want to miss any of my uploads, hit that subscribe button. I will be back on Tuesday for a Writing Tip Tuesday, and again on Saturday for another Story Study Saturday. So I will see you guys on Tuesday.